Hi there, Liam O'Gogan here with another video from the Does It Matter research program. In this episode, I just want to share with you a dilemma I've been having and a proposed solution for that dilemma. I have been trying over the last 2.5 months or so to interrogate a process of the interviewing and selection for the job of census enumerator here in West Donegal by the Central Statistics Office in Ireland, of which I was an interviewee, and that information which I've been managed to glean so far, and my analysis of that information with all of the impediments that have been put in my way and the what I would call convenient losing of data, also uncovered another massive problem, which topped out on also uncovered another significant problem, which I became aware of shortly before the date for filling in the census 2016 on the 24th of April last. Now just bear in mind that you and me, that we were all guaranteed the securitization of the personal information in that data for the next 100 years. So this is a pretty serious guarantee. And I had become aware not only of the breach of this undertaking or promise or quality statement, but more importantly that the characters or the skill sets or the behaviours, the professional behaviours which operated in this office were frighteningly deficient. And I chose to share that data as far and wide as I could on Sunday the 24th of April in order to make people aware that in filling in their census forms they were really putting their own personal data at risk. Now I just want to state clearly here, I used in my video earlier a sample from the 1911 census form reflecting on my own genealogy, etc. And it's something that I feel I have a right and a desire to do, to fill in a census form. I have here a census form and I feel I cannot fill it in until I have had some independent reassurance that my data can be securitized. So it's a major problem for me. Anyway, as part of that, in order to back up the credibility of my statement, and this is very important, it was necessary for me to actually satisfy the doubting Thomas trust but verify principle in the public space that I wasn't just making this stuff up. Remember, my posit in relation to this was competing with the weight of the CSO, with the repeated statements by Deirdre Cullen, the chief statistician of the CSO, clearly and repeatedly and emphatically and passionately stating the CSO had never released anybody's personal data. And you can review the evidence of that in one of the videos in relation to Deirdre Cullen's protestations within the YouTube video channel or in the playlists here. So what I created was this enormous document, a lengthy document, a work in progress document, which contains the series of communication that I've been having with the Data Protection Office and the CSO and various people over the last period of time. And this data contained, in order to prove that what I said is true, it contained this material which showed the data belonging to individuals. And this was done as a matter of public interest, to protect the public, because this is the most serious, this is just, it's one of the most serious issues. People were going on about not filling their census because information might be given to Irish Water. I have given clear, definitive evidence that this has been, it is happening in the very same contemporaneous time frame that we were being asked to fill in our forms. So the dilemma I have is that in order to prove my point and to be believed, I had to show the evidence. The difficulty around that is that evidence affected people, and I have written to all of the candidates to try and describe what I've been doing. It is my belief that, certainly with the data I have, it has been claimed by Magella Lysett from the CSO that they have met with each and every candidate, which appears to include two who cancelled the interview and one who didn't show up, and people who didn't get the job. So I don't know, maybe they did. I don't have that data. And that all of these people have asked the CSO to represent their interest in forcing me to take the stuff off the internet. So just to make clear, I harbour no ill will or interest. I don't know any of these individuals, and it's not, they were entitled to get jobs or whatever. My argument was that I was denied, I believe, a fair process, and I believe my evaluation, if properly investigated, would be overturned, the decision, and I'm being prevented from an independent and professional review of that by the incompetence of the or deliberate obfuscation, I don't know, of either deliberately losing information or burying information, or managing to have no procedures in order to get it lost or whatever, plus the presentation to me of a purportedly independent internal reviewer who didn't seem to understand the concept of due process in the first place. Anyway, we're at a situation, I said, I have, since the 4th of May this year, just a bit of background, Magella Lycett, I believe, was behind the process of asking some of these people to demand a takedown order by YouTube, and if one goes into that conversation, other night, YouTube just simply react and take people down. That's it. There's no, if you think there's no right of appeal in an Irish court, will you take on YouTube? Anyway, it's another matter. I then subsequently edited the video and further blurred the people's detail, because at that point the fact of the data breach had been then recorded and discussed on Irish National Broadcasting Station Radio na Gaeltachta, so I had some independent verification that what I said was correct. I found myself now being pressurized by the data protection authorities, who seem to be really insistent on, bullying and pressurizing me with threats of legal enforcement, while at the same time claiming in their documentation to me that the CSO may or may not, and allegedly have breached the Data Protection Act, even though I couldn't have got the data unless I got it from the CSO in the first place. So I have been trying to seek a way to do two things. One, to remove these people and their details off the pitch, because they're not relevant to my conversation at all, and their individual details isn't relevant to me. I have no personal interest in doing any damage to them. And while separately maintaining and preserving for future retrospective evaluation that my statement and the veracity of my statement that data was breached is actually maintained. And living in a modern society where, as I say, my sense of this Ministry of Truth action from the metaphor from 1984, where all attempts by those in power to just eradicate the evidence of a past, it's like the weapons of mass destruction conversation, has been too apparent in my existence. So I'm trying to find a way that I can honourably move forward to remove those people's details from ongoing exhibition, while still maintaining the proof or veracity of the original record. So in the light of that, I tried to work collaboratively with Magella Lycett, the head of data office in the CSO, a senior public servant, and I found that not only was she not cooperative, but she hasn't either acknowledged receipt of my email proposals, nor has she responded to either the proposals or to the reminders of same. Now, I made that proposal to Magella Lycett on the 4th of May last in an email at 11:47, in which I described to her about how I've been trying to contemplate to remove the personal details of the enumerator candidates who also have been a breach, along with me, of a data breach by the CSO. And I pointed out to her that because of the reality of a doubting Thomas principle, where any future reader who is denied the facility to actually examine for themselves, as Thomas demanded, the evidence of the wrongdoing and of the breach of law by the CSO would understandably undermine the veracity or authenticity of my argument. And just as I'm doing this video today on the 12th of the 5th, that's the 12th of May 2016, I'm quite mindful of the information which has been released in the last day or so from the O'Higgins Commission report into the Sergeant McCabe affair. And I'm just personally watching how the legitimacy of Sergeant McCabe has been attacked in an extremely subtle but powerful way. Him being said as being a nice guy, committed to his job, lots of integrity, but a bit prone to exaggeration, etc. So I'm trying to protect the authenticity of the original data. It's not about me, it's about the data. So that's what I'm trying to do in this case. So essentially, I made the following proposal. I made the proposal that I would redact the material and overlay on top of that information about an email which was to be provided to me by the CSO, signed by Pádraig Dalton, the Director General, on behalf of the CSO, who has been cognizant for some time of this issue, of all the associated correspondence that I have had sight of, and of the breaches themselves, confirming that what you yourself, that's Magella, has claimed re the breach, the admission of the breach, the reporting of both breaches to the Data Protection Commissioner, and the official notification of these breaches to the victims of this unlawful breach, including me as one of those victims. So in other words, what I was offering to do, if I can show a sample picture of what I did, this is a sample of what I sent her. I had taken the original document, and you'll see if I zoom in here closely, I had performed a redaction of the data. Now, just again, when you look at this, this is a professional redaction. This is what should be done by the data protection people if they were releasing information. This is precisely what they didn't do. Whatever they were doing, it was submoronic. That's what they produced, a submoronic solution. So this data here I'm producing in a professionally redacted way, where those details, you can't get into them essentially, but that it would be done, and it would be counterbalanced by an undertaking or an admission by the CSO that this data actually did reasonably exist. So that's all I was asking. That, you know, they say what they said. By the way, Magella has already claimed that that the CSO, she has claimed in their phone recordings, which are part of the data stream that I put up on YouTube, that these that the CSO have actually put their hands up and admitted all this. Of course, I haven't seen that anywhere. I've no record of it. The public record still stands that Deirdre Cullen has still been claiming in the public domain that the CSO have never, ever released anybody's personal data. And once again, please look over at the video of the recording of Deirdre Cullen stating this on the national airwaves. So what has happened is, I simply said, when I receive this email, I'll proceed without delay to replace the PDF with the agreed one. So to be honest with you, I did expect that Magella would get on the move here, because she keeps talking about fairness to other people and seems to be passionate about representing other people's interests and fairness. Now, she's not remotely interested in the unfair treatment that I've experienced, either in the interview process or in the release in the ether of my personal details, much more detailed than was ever released about other individuals, and stuff that has reputational damage for me, I submit. Anyway, I just thought she would act professionally in relation to this. And again, I appended to that email a sample of what I could do, so she could see it for herself. I mean, I'm not sure what these people know what well, look, they need to know what redaction is. That's the business they're in. This is the Central Statistics Office. The only reason they exist, their lifeblood for existence, is the management, the curation, the collection, the collation, the protection, the securitization of your personal data and mine. So this is not an excusable sort of, I didn't really know how to do this stuff. This is their business, folks. So anyway, I sent her that, got no response. Am I surprised? So I've reminded her in relation to this stuff, and again, nothing was done. So to try and put the hoosh on to them, I basically said to her on the 5th of May at 12:10, if you haven't responded by 5 p.m. today, I'll assume you're no longer interested in pursuing a positive approach to represent the interests of the candidates who you have claimed has sought your interest to address their needs. So I want to say to you folks that Magella, like I said, or no one in the CSO, including the Director General Pádraig Dalton, who has been kept cognizant of these affairs, have done anything to actually solve the problem of the people they're claiming to represent. And I offer that in evidence that the only interest the CSO have is basically in arse covering. That's really all they're interested in. They're not interested in your interests or mine. They're interested in just escaping the light of the public gaze. Anyway, I have reflected on these from an ethical and a moral perspective with a number of people for whom I have enormous regard, and who I value mainly because of their philosophy of challenge through peer support, who are absolutely willing to both challenge and push me in terms of the quality or otherwise of my argument. And when we have a philosophy that in a meritocracy of arguments, the best argument survives. So with their help, I have come up with a proposal which is, and what was pointed out to me, that it suits, like the CSO don't care about the other people. What it suits both them, and in collaboration with the data protection, to try and criminalise me, or marginalise and criminalise me, as a way of avoiding the much bigger issue that they need to look at. And yeah, look, that's as old as the hills. That line is as old as the hills. So I've decided, seeing that these people have just abdicated all professional and personal responsibility in the protection of their clients or candidates, I decided just to go ahead with this myself. So essentially what I have done, I just take you up to the top of this document. So I've done two things. Firstly, I've updated the document to yesterday, and up at the front I've just put in a description of what this is about. And I've also suggested the methodology. So essentially I have taken the material on what I call pages 38 and 98. I've redacted them to remove the individual's details. Little bit of mistake there, but I'll explain why I can't change it right now. But it has a secured backup plan to preserve retrospective proof that the original data actually existed. So just quickly to go to the pages involved, like page 38, if I can just run down the side here. So there we are, there's page 38. So you can see there all the data which originally was exposed is the personally identifiable data is now no longer accessible. And for a moment there I panicked and I said, oh look, there's a big black spot in the middle there, and even I can see at just normal screen resolution there's data in there. So I'll zoom in on it and say, oh wow, that data is in there. But strangely enough, folks, that just goes to prove that data was always there, but this data doesn't define any individual, right? So it's just a number. And just for your interest on this side over here, there's a lot of data in here. See this data here? All it is numbers, and it shows the date that these people were interviewed on. I just want to make it clear that Val McBride, Assistant Principal Officer of the Census Section, fought real hard, claiming that if I had access to these things here, see this data here. He was saying if I had access to that data, that data would in some way identify the people. Look at this, is just so. The arguments and the responses by very senior civil servants here is beyond disgrace. Now the other thing is just to say that all her demands by Magella Lysett of me, she never once referred to the data on this page. Like, it just shows these people obviously don't even read the documents that they have been provided to. In fact, I collated and collected all this data so that they could read it, because they didn't seem to be able to manage their own communications data. So somewhere up on this page here then, this was the page which originally was 92 on the previous document, on the earlier version, the non-updated version. And this was the data that they insisted I remove. So I mean, I just decided to jump past this space. They're wasting my time. I could have done what they required, and it still wouldn't have solved the problem. I was trying to actually help them solve a problem, and they weren't listening, and still aren't listening. So essentially, what I did in page 98 is effectively the same. Redacted the specifics, but I also, as I said, did it in page 38. So we're back to okay. So I've done that part. I have then replaced. If I just show you now, well, I'll just show you what. So I'm just going into my publications on issue.com, and you can see the document, and that document is at the link that the original document was at. So I've maintained the link and I've retained the stats on that there. So if I click on that, if you click on that, so if I open that document there, you can see that's the new version of the document that's placed there. So I have basically replaced the original document, which was unredacted, with this new document. The other thing is this document is now also security coded. Now, whatever that means. I'm not saying this is, obviously it's nothing like NSA security coding or whatever, so I think it's as professional as anybody in the CSO is ever going to try and do it. So done through Adobe Acrobat Professional, this has been properly and professionally redacted. So the last thing I need to do, and that is to ensure this material that the presence of this material, that it did exist at the time, is upheld. It has been proposed in talks with a couple of people that I'm going to seek a small number of people, between 3 and 5 people, with whom I'm going to share the unredacted original document, and I will ask them to retain that document in their personal environment, secure environment, and that they can attest almost like Yodas to the fact that this information did exist and they're willing to do so. And because that's the only way that in time, looking back at this, and this is the only reason I've done this. I mean, the purpose of all of this exercise in the Does It Matter research program is to leave a legacy for reflection for anybody who has any serious interest in quality of public service, in critical thinking, in the concept of ethics, and essentially that basic question, does it matter, will have access to a forensic trail of data into a range of issues, and separately to look at what I call the systemic organizational behavioral fractals and how they can be challenged, modified, in order to create a more effective and better society for all of us. So that's the vision, and in order for that vision to have stability, sustainability, and traceability back to original, that's the process that I'm going to do. So I'm going to seek to identify a small number of people who I trust, and that's interesting because I had to ask myself, who could I trust? And the original pillars of society who we all would have trusted before, your parish priest, your local guard, your solicitor, your doctor, all those people. Unfortunately, I'm 60 years of age. I've grown through the last couple of generations where all of those pillars of society have ended up showing themselves to be fundamentally containing the equivalent of construction pyrite or basically collapsing. And also my posit is that every one of them has been sustained by a legal system in our country which suffers from what I call a significant corruption of thought processes. And just in order that no one misunderstands what I'm saying, I'm not specifically saying that individuals or particular people in the legal system are corrupt. I think there's enough other people saying that without me getting involved in that. I'm talking about a corruption of thought processes, because I actually think most of these people having enabled their minds to be, or thought process to be corrupted, actually believe that what they're doing is okay. Anyway, that's for another day. If you want to look that up, you'll see my contribution to the McGill Summer School in 2011 from the floor in relation to that, the corruption of thought processes, which again will be in the stream in relation to this topic. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Does It Matter process. I'm interested in how that methodology of selecting a group of trusted Yodas can help other people who are trying to bring rich dataset material into the public view and are worried about either releasing in-camera material or material which those in authority are trying to suppress. So perhaps this can be a methodology that people with similar interests can develop. Okay, for now, thank you very much. Liam O'Gogan.